What's up, y'all? Michael Elefante here. Today, I want to talk to you about how consumers view debt versus how investors or business owners view debt, because it is a very different mindset and certainly yields very, very different results. And ultimately, this is kind of how consumers and most people in the poorer middle class continue to stay in the poorer middle class, and how the wealthy continue to build additional wealth and get richer over time. So I want to explain some things today that can really help you guys along your journey to financial freedom that is crucial to understand, and how to leverage debt appropriately in investments, and how to stray away from leveraging debt to acquire things that we may or may not need today. All right, so first with the consumer. We're all guilty of it, okay? Especially younger people. We have credit cards, access to credit cards, or maybe cash advances, or money from the bank for a car purchase or a new home purchase, or whatever it may be. Today I'll definitely be talking more along the example of buying a car, or maybe using credit cards to pay for an expensive vacation that we may or may not be able to afford today, and say, we'll pay for it later. So in other words, consumers use debt, let's say credit card debt, in order to buy something today that they cannot afford, but they trust that with future income they will be able to pay it back later. But remember, it's at a premium. So you're paying, credit cards can be as high as 20-30% interest if you're late on paying your statement balance. So, a lot of us consumers think, okay, well, we'll buy this today and I'm sure I'll pay it off early and I'll avoid most of the interest charges. And that's a really bad way of thinking, because over the course of time, if you continue to do this, buy vacations, new clothing, go shopping, buy, cars we can't afford, that debt begins to pile up and snowball out of control. And before we know it, we're swimming in debt up to our nose, and it makes it hard for us to breathe and function each day, and it causes a lot of stress and anxiety. So in other words, consumers use debt to spend money and acquire things that they may or may not need today. So money is going out the door. We are paying more for the item than what it's actually worth. Now, investors, on the other hand, it is the polar opposite. Investors use debt or leverage other people's money to make more money. And this is very important to understand, right? As a consumer, we're using debt to buy things and pay more for that item than what it's actually worth. Think about a car. You buy a car for $10,000, finance 80% of it at an 8% interest rate. Over the course of the next, whatever your term is, 5 years, you're ultimately going to be paying far more than $10,000 for that car. Not to mention the car is going to depreciate over time. On the other hand, investors, think about this. We will use the bank's money, or maybe another person's money, like a hard money loan, to buy a real estate investment for $100,000. Let's say we put 20% of our own money down. We have spent 20% of that house's value today, and we've let the bank buy the rest of the house with their money. And we have renters paying us monthly rent each month, according to a lease, or if you're doing a short-term rental, again, your bookings revenue per month, that's paying down the loan for you. And over time, that asset is actually not only going to pay you monthly cash flow each month, but additionally is going to grow over time and appreciate typically and keep up with inflation, things like that we've talked about in previous videos, and ultimately be worth more later on. And keep in mind, you only paid for a small portion of that. So on the investor side, we're paying a small portion of our own money out of pocket, sometimes no money out of pocket, and we are reaping the benefits of monthly cash flow and also reaping the benefits of appreciation and loan pay down the road. So we are using money from the bank to make money for ourselves, and leveraging, that's called leverage, right? So we're leveraging the bank's money to create money and create wealth. Now on the consumer side, we're leveraging credit cards or bank's money, or maybe even money from a friend or family member, and promise to pay them back at a 10 to 20% interest rate, ultimately paying more for a liability that does not put cash in our pocket at the end of each month than it's actually worth. And those assets remain either useless. For example, a vacation is worth nothing, after it's paid for, in comparison to something, again, an asset that will put money into your pocket, or a car that ultimately will depreciate over time, and you'll also pay a premium for that car if you're borrowing money for it as well. All right, guys, I'm going to break down a very simple example for you. All right, first we're going to be talking about how consumers use debt and leverage other people's money to, again, buy maybe a vacation or a car or something like that, okay? So we have us, nice happy consumer. We're getting ready to go on a vacation we can't afford, or buy that nice car we always dreamed about but also can't afford. And here's the bank, all right, or a credit card company, whatever you want to think. This is the money source that's going to be funding our fund and our purchase today. All right, so we are going to be putting our own cash. If we have any example for a car purchase, or if it's a vacation, maybe we can afford 20% of the vacation, and we know that. So we're going to leverage the rest of that 80% from the bank. That's money coming from the bank to make this purchase. And I'm just going to use a simple kind of bar chart example to help you understand. So at the beginning, let's say we put 20% down on a new car, or again, we could fund 20% of our vacation. The rest of it is going to be an interest-bearing loan from a credit card company or from the bank. And this is debt. Now, over time, let's say it doesn't matter really, 1 year, 5 years, whatever the length it takes you to pay that debt back to the bank, you're spending a lot in interest. So, this is the end result. Now, this is how much total you were spending today from the bank and your money. This is how much you ended up paying for it. The top is how much you paid in interest on top of what it was actually worth. And again, ultimately you paid all of this back to the bank and in interest. So think about this as a consumer. We're leveraging other people's money to buy things that we cannot afford today, and we're ultimately paying more for that item or vacation, again, car, than it's actually worth. And what's the scary thing is if we buy things like a car, it's not an asset because cars depreciate as soon as you drive them off the lot. So ultimately, the car is actually going to be worth this much a few years down the road when you pay that loan off. It was worth this much when you first bought the car. The car is now worth this much, and you've paid a massive premium for that car. So again, this is a liability. It's something that's taking a ton of money out of our own pocket. Again, we're leveraging the bank for money to basically accrue liabilities that are not going to help us build wealth long term. It will keep us poor. It will keep us in the middle class. Ultimately, this is a loser's mindset, right? I can't afford this, but I'm going to take a loan out today so I can enjoy something today and pay it back in the future. Bad mindset. All right, guys, now we're going to flip it and we're going to look at how investors leverage debt and leverage other people's money in order to acquire assets that ultimately will put money into our pocket each month and over time can grow and help grow our net worth and grow wealth over time, okay? So again, we have happy guy over here, this time investor mindset, going to the bank to ask for money to purchase something. But in this case, we're going to be put down, let's say, 20% of our own money, again, towards a house or a rental property. The bank is going to put 80% down into the house for us, and we're taking that out in the form of a loan. So that's an interest-bearing loan that we're going to pay back, let's say, over 15 or 30 years, whatever mortgage time frame that you agree on with your lender. Now, at the beginning of this, remember that we have spent 20% of our own money. Now, the difference between this is we're not going to be paying that 80% back. If we're renting this apartment or house, whatever the asset is, out to a consumer who needs a place to live, they're going to be paying rent to us each month. That's going to not only be paying down the loan for you, but is going to be putting cash in your pocket each month. Remember, asset is something that puts money into your pocket each month, okay? And what's really cool about this from an investor's mindset, again, if you remember as a consumer, a car or a vacation, whatever, is going to depreciate over time, if not immediately. Okay, but what's cool about this is over time, towards the end of paying off that loan, again, this is how much money you've spent. That has not changed. You invested 20% of your own money into this asset, and actually over time, the asset has grown in value from appreciation. But also all of this, all of that has been paid for by your renters. Okay, so now your asset is worth more today. You've only spent this much. Again, we're leveraging the bank's money, leveraging debt in order to create wealth and build a pile of money over time for us. Again, in closing, consumers versus investors mindset for leveraging debt. Consumer is leveraging other people's money to acquire things for themselves today that are ultimately a liability or that does not put cash into our pocket long term or on a month-to-month basis. Investors, on the other hand, leverage debt or leverage other people's money to acquire assets such as a rental property and real estate, and that will ultimately pay us cash flow each month and pay down the loan over time. And again, nothing more out of our pocket during that loan pay down period. So ultimately, building our wealth without having to invest further dollars in that one particular asset. Again, I wish you all luck on your journey to financial freedom. It never hurts to increase your education on financial literacy or your financial education. I really encourage you guys to continue watching other YouTube channels. I've learned a ton from folks on YouTube. There's a lot of great content out there, and I really highly encourage you to change the way you think. If you're thinking more on the consumer side today, you can totally become an investor of some sort. You don't have to have an absurd amounts of money. It's really just changing your mindset today and implement what you've learned tomorrow and over the long term. So lastly, I talked about it in a couple previous videos. I highly encourage you all to get a Kindle or download Audible. It helps digest tons of great information within books out there or podcasts. Again, I'm a big Robert Kiyosaki fan, so Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Cash Flow Quadrant, among others. But again, I have links to some of those books and again, Kindle by Amazon and Audible free trial as well below. So check those out. And thanks again for watching, guys. I'll talk to you next time.